Hello and welcome to another video here. And so this video is going to be talking about spawning in our asteroid as our game progresses. So right now we have one prefab of our asteroid, but there's no way of kind of like dynamically spawning in these guys so that you have kind of an endless game to play. You can play this game pretty much forever. As long as you don't hit one of these asteroids, you should be able to keep playing, right? And so if we want to have that kind of functionality, we have to be able to spawn in our asteroids kind of dynamically. So to do this, we're going to do some coding, essentially. The first step, though, is just to add a empty game object. I'm going to call it spawner. And with spawner, what we're going to do is we're going to be adding a script on it. So we've gone down here before and went scripts and added. So we'll just do that again. So go scripts, create C# script, and I'm going to call this guy a spawner. So I don't know why it's throwing reds everywhere, but it should be fine. What we'll want to do in this guy is to make a public game object variable, and I'm going to call it spawn prefab, because we're going to be referencing a prefab that we are going to be spawning in. And then in this update, so just to show how we kind of spawn something in, we're going to go and type in something called instantiate. And in instantiate, we're going to put some parentheses, and then we're going to put in our spawn prefab. And that should be all I have to type in there. Put this guy again. And if you go back to the code, you should be able to go click on spawner. And then what we want to do is take the spawning script, and you can also just drag and drop it on top of the kind of thing, or you can just go and do the add component, type in spawner. That's going to need a spawn prefab, and so we're not going to want to drag in, not going to want to do this where you drag the asteroid from the scene in. Instead, what you're going to want to do is go to the prefabs folder and drag asteroid in there. And that just, the reason why is because this one is in the scene, so if this one goes off and we remove it or something like that later on, which we probably will, this guy in the project will still be a reference for the spawn prefab. And if we just watch this, you'll notice this happens. Because we put it in the update, the instantiate of this asteroid just spawns an asteroid every single frame. So now we've got like a bazillion asteroids just spawning out and shooting. It's actually pretty funny because that it looks like there's an asteroid that's not moving, but he actually is. It's actually pretty cool. Anyways, so that's obviously not exactly what we want. What we want, ideally, is that it spawns maybe one asteroid, then waits like a specific amount of time, and then spawns another one, right? So what we have is kind of there, but we need to obviously have a little bit of a delay between each time that we spawn. Alright, I'm back. I had to figure out a few things, supposedly, that went wrong with my Visual Studio Code, but it's all good now. Okay, so before we stopped the spawner, we were just trying to get it so that the spawner would periodically spawn. Right now, every single frame, we're shooting out one of these asteroids, or spawn prefabs, and that's maybe a little bit too quickly. So what we want to do is add two things to it. First, I'm going to have a public float, which is going to be called spawn time. And let's say that equals to 1. So we'll do 1 every second. That's the goal. We'll have another one, another float. So private this time though. Float. And I'm going to say till, I'll say current spawn time. That's what we'll call it. I'll make that 0. Now, what we can do here is in update, we'll take current spawn time, and we're going to say plus equals time dot delta time. That's auto completed badly for me. Delta time. And what this means is we're adding on to spawn time the time dot delta time. So it's going to progressively get larger. This effectively is the same, plus equals is the same as doing this, pretty much. It's just a shorthand. So it would be taking the current spawn time and adding time dot delta time. I'm going to revert that though, so because I say this way. Okay, and so the idea on this is that we're gradually increasing current spawn time, and then if our current spawn time, so we're going to write this out, if current spawn time, or yes, current spawn time is greater than spawn time. So if our current spawn time progresses up and then it gradually gets past this 1, so after 1 second this would happen, we're going to then know that this is time to spawn. So we have to add the instantiate here, and then we get our spawner. So now if we just were to save this, for example, this will give it so that it delays 1 second before spawning things. We should be able to view this. So let's go to Unity. Should be able to see. It takes 1 second, but then it spawns things every single frame. So it does delay it, but it only delays it once. And so if we just want it to delay it again, all we have to do is when we spawn our prefab, just say that our current spawn time will equal back to 0 again. So it resets. And so this is how we've made our looping spawner. Just kind of again, what we do is we have our spawning prefab. We have a spawn time, which is the amount of time we're going to spawn. This private current spawn time is the thing that actually tracks what the current time is while we're going through. It ends up we don't need our start method, so we can probably just remove that just to kind of clean it up. And then in our update, every single frame we're going to be adding to current spawn time. If current spawn time starts to be larger than spawn time, so whatever time it is, it's been that amount of time, then we're going to spawn a prefab by using instantiate, and that's what instantiate does. It just spawns something. And then we're going to reset our spawn time. I'm going to save that. We're going to go into Unity, and there we go. Now we got a consistent flow of spawning, and it's constantly delayed by a second each. Okay, so that's step 1 of our spawner. The next step, obviously, is that having a spawner that just spawns in one line isn't really hard to avoid. You kind of just sit there and stand away from it. So the next step of this would be kind of to make sure that our spawner actually has some sort of randomness to where it's spawning. So ideally, you'd have some sort of width value that we set up, and we just continuously spawn asteroids in that kind of width area. So let's try to figure that out. The first step of figuring that out is we actually have to just be able to set a position at all. Right now, you'll notice it kind of spawns if we look at our scene view, it spawns right where the asteroid prefab is. And that's just because when we made this asteroid prefab, if you look in the asteroid prefab, it actually has a position of -3 and 6.48. And that's just where it was in the scene when we dragged it in. And that's where the spawner is spawning it. Because when you just instantiate like we're doing right now, it just takes whatever value the asteroid has, or the prefab has. If we do not want that functionality, we actually have to give it a position. And so to do that, we need to go in here, and we need to say vector 3 position. And right now, I'm just going to say giving it the position of our spawner. So the way we do that is getting transform.position. So vector 3 is like a vector 2, except it has one more spot in it, so it's an x, y, and z value. And so everything in Unity by default has kind of like that z position, so we have to include that. And we're just making it a little variable here so that we can edit it a little bit further after getting this base value. And we're going to then in instantiate, we're going to comma position, comma, and you have to give it one more thing when you start giving it a position, which is the rotation. And so all you have to type is quaternion.identity. It's a little bit of a weird guy to write, but it just basically means no rotation. And that's it. So yeah, so let's just go into Unity. The code's not being nice and not auto-completing for me, so let's just make sure what's wrong here. Transform, I spelled position. Okay. So now if we have our spawner and we're just looking at this in the scene view, we should be able to move it maybe like up here or something just to visualize that it is indeed spawning asteroids up there. It is. Our spot, my spawner is by accident actually like at a really weird spot, so it doesn't actually visualize. So let's just make that Z0 again. There we go. Okay. So now at least we control the position, but we also still are not controlling the kind of like X position that should be kind of side to side. Well, it's not too hard once you have the position in total. One thing we're going to want to add here is another public float, so we can like modify this value. I'm going to call it spawn width. I'm going to say it's equal to maybe 5 in the beginning. And so what we want to do here with the position is we want to add a value. So we're going to add some value of our position, and it's either going to go to the left or the right. And the easiest kind of way to do this is just to make a new vector 3. So this will have 3 values. And we just want to give it something on the right one, so the X value. And we needed to make it a random value though. So we're putting it in this X value, but we need to make a random value. And if we want to do that, there's a nice little thing that we have in Unity called random.range. And with random.range, you have to provide it with 2 numbers. So the first being the minimum number, and the second being the maximum number. So in this case, we just do negative spawn width, comma, spawn width. So this will give you a random number in between the negative version of spawn width and the positive version of spawn width. So if we have 5 for spawn width, it'll be between 5 and -5. So this end will end up having the result of either positioning this a little bit 5 to the right or 5 to the left. Sorry, 5 to the right, 5 to the left, yeah. Of where our transform position currently is. You can save that. Should be able to go into Unity now. And probably make this guy centered. Spawner, so he has a X of 0. But then we should be able to click play, and we should see him spawning things to the left and the right of him. There we are. So he spawns kind of randomly around in that range. Obviously, we didn't make the range wide enough. We just kind of have to figure out how big the camera is. I think 10, so if we do that, it should be probably 10 on each side, I think, maybe. Let's check that out. If you set up 10. And that's something you can toy around with. Probably in a polish thing, we'll eventually make it figure out whatever the side of the screen is. But for now, I'm just going to leave it maybe up to like 16 or something, just so it gets the entirety of the screen. Of course, I'm doing this in play mode, so I have to redo it again outside of play mode. I'm going to put it on 16 for now, just so it kind of like stretches the entire screen. So there we go. That's the spawner in action. If you want to make it so that the spawner doesn't appear, like the asteroids don't show up like spawning in the screen, you can just raise this thing a little bit higher, and then they'll spawn off screen, and then just kind of come into the screen that's showing up. Yeah, there you go. Cool, I'm going to cut the video here, and then in the next part of this lesson, we'll be talking about actually shooting these guys, so making something that shoots and also destroys the asteroids back, because right now we can't fight back, so it'll be cool to actually fight back against the asteroids. Cool, I hope to see you guys then.